Hey guys, how's it going? Justin here with Practically Squared. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, what we're going to be talking all about is the MDT Send-It levels. We're going to be talking about the new MDT Gen 2 Send-It level versus the MV3, I guess what they're considering the Generation 1 as made by MDT Send-It level. Of course, this thing was originally made by a company, LRA, and then MDT bought out LRA or acquired the rights to it or something. But MDT started making these a couple years ago, and then now they finally released their second iteration of this. Now, as always, I like to hit you guys with a product disclosure. It's going to be real quick today. There's no product affiliation in today's video. I bought both these levels at full price. I've owned this one since 2023, the MV3 that is, and then the Gen 2 Send-It level, I pre-ordered it late winter, early spring, and then I want to say I took possession of this item probably May or sometime like that. It got delivered. So I've had it for a couple months. Both these levels, I've ran them in 2-day national level PRS matches, Pro Series matches, as well as ran them in 1-day regional matches and done a ton of practice along the way with it. So I feel like I'm comfortable enough with both of these levels, how I used them, got to play with them, got to let the new kind of factor of the Gen 2 wear off, and got to overall formulate kind of my opinion. In today's video, I hope to discuss some of the pros and cons of each of these levels. I do feel they're dramatically different. Like a lot of times whenever a product goes from like a Gen 1 to a Gen 2, they make small minor idiosyncrasy detail changes. In the case of this, these are two completely different products, and there's definitely going to be some people out there that still prefer the original Gen 1 Send-It level, I guess we'll call it, and there's going to be people out there that love the new Gen 2. And hopefully in today's video, as I said, we'll go over some of those pros and cons, and hopefully you guys can decide that from your seat at home. So without further ado, we got a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it. All right, guys, so first off, we're going to talk about the OG kid on the block, the MDT MV3 Send-It level. So as I said, LRA actually made this thing, and then MDT bought the rights to it or bought out LRA. I don't know exactly what happened. But MDT started producing it. Whenever they started producing it, they called the model the MV3. So the MV3 level features a 5-light setup, and you could either run it horizontal as it's going to come out of the box, or you could get adapters. This is actually an MDT branded adapter that mounts it vertically. A main reason why you want to mount it vertically is to keep it tighter into your rifle. Also, the inherent failure point of this level was going to be your knob on here to turn the level on. This knob, if it gets busted off or gets broken, it makes your level inoperable, right? So a lot of guys were mounting it vertical just to keep it compact. A lot of guys, if you had it mounted horizontal, shoved it in a Pelican case and it got kind of smashed, it could break this thing off in the case. So that's why a lot of guys started mounting them vertical. And honestly, once you start mounting them vertical and you kind of get used to it, it's pretty intuitive. I will say it's more intuitive horizontal, but whenever you mount it vertical, you could see I put actual lines whenever I first got this thing and started running it vertical. I put lines on it to help me figure out which way I needed to roll my rifle. But I really do like this level. Some optional accessories you could have got for it. Brant-Built was making a fiber optic kit. Now it only used 3 of the lights on their fiber optic, and then Light Up Fiber Optics, which is Kyle McGrogan's company, he was making a setup which transmitted all 5 lights through fiber optics, and you could mount them under your ocular housing of your scope there. So there were a couple different accessories, as well as companies made attachments to attach this to any number of different scope mounts out there, right? Super popular. A ton of guys were using these things. The big selling point to just a digital level, but specifically the MV3 Send-It level, what I really like is the way I set mine up. It's kind of off to the left. I'm a right-handed shooter, and I'm able to pick it up in my peripheral vision. I shoot with both eyes open, so over here, kind of in my field of view, I'm picking up the color of that light, and it allowed me to remain focused on my target, on the conditions, building a position, and just naturally, as I'm working that position, settling into that bag, I'd be rolling that rifle to get it level, close the bolt, make sure I'm level, and then go through my shot process. So that's kind of the big advantage of the digital level. It's instant, like it's pretty quick versus some of the levels out there, especially if it gets cold, the viscosity in there. Some of your traditional Spirit bubble levels are really slow. So that's the advantage with a digital level, specifically the MDT Send-It level. Now, some of the downsides of this, obviously it's an electronic device, so anything electronic can and will fail, and usually it happens at the worst time. I've seen a handful of these go down at matches. Usually it's batteries or they get completely soaked. They are some sort of waterproof. I don't know if they're entirely waterproof or how low they're rated, but these things can handle water, but occasionally you will get water to seep down in there and they will start acting up. I've seen a handful of them act up in rainy matches. personally, knock on wood, I've been pretty fortunate. Whenever I come home from a rainy match, I always will pull the cover off, and then I'll blow this thing out with compressed air, and I'll let it sit in front of a fan for a day or two, just to ensure everything gets dried out if any water did seep down into there. Also, the battery life on this thing, it took an obscure battery, but they're relatively cheap on Amazon. But if you had a battery die and you didn't have a spare, you're probably not going to find a local store that's going to have these. So you had to pretty much order the batteries most of the time online. But they were cheap enough to just buy a giant pack of them. And then I would say, I can't give you an exact estimate as far as battery life of this thing, but I would say every 3 or 4 matches or so, you would be looking to change it. Obviously, it depends on how bright you run this thing, and whether you shut it off at the end of the day or forget to leave it on, or whatever the case may be. But some of the complaints people had, obviously this knob could break off. Another complaint people had was the batteries were kind of obscure, and the battery life, while it was good, it wasn't great. And then the third thing people didn't like about it was kind of the size. It's not super big, but it's bigger than most of your traditional levels. So overall, that's pretty much the MV3 Send-It level. Honestly, this is a good setup. I like the 5-light array. We'll kind of come back to this and kind of share my thoughts at the end of the video. But now let's take a minute to talk about the new Gen 2 Send-It level. So the new Gen 2 Send-It level, as you can see, it's much smaller in size. Also, they opted to go to a different battery. I believe this thing's running CR2032s, if I'm not right. I'll annotate it in the video. But this thing's running off of a traditional watch battery. The battery life on this thing is going to be significantly more. I'll put it here in the video. But the battery life is going to be significantly more, and if you do need spare batteries, you're more likely to find these at your local, Rite Aid, Walgreens, place like that. They're basically watch batteries is what these are running off of. So battery life got improved dramatically. They got rid of that button on the side. Now the way you activate it is this little button here on the inside, and they went to a 3-light setup. Now, as I said in the beginning of the video, I feel like a lot of times whenever companies go from one generation to the next, they make small little changes. In the case of the Gen 2 MDT Send-It level, they made a giant change to the point where this thing's completely different. Sure, it's a bubble level. Sure, it's got red, green, and blue lights on it. But the way this thing operates is functionally entirely different. There's 4 different modes in here, but most of the modes, what you're going to find is that center light will always be lit. It's either going to be lit green if you're level, blue or red depending on how candid you are. Now, depending on which mode you go in will determine whether your outside lights either light up solid or they'll blink, or you could just run the 1-light setup. So there's different modes in here, but essentially your center light is always projecting a color. It's either green, blue, or red. And then if you're extremely candid, the mode that I preferred was the blinking outside light. So you would be, for example, red in the center and blinking red on the outside, and that would tell you, hey, you're really candid, you got to get your shit squared away. So it's functionally different, and the reason why I kind of explain that is because I expected this thing just to be a 3-light version of the original Send-It. What I anticipated happening was your center light only lit up green, and then if you were candid, it lit up, say blue, for example, and if you were extremely candid, it would light up blue, and maybe that center light would project blue as well. However, that's not an actual mode. Like, I guess I would like this thing to operate, center light green, blue, red, and then extremely candid, I would like the option for that center light to either project a second blue or red light, depending on which orientation you're candid. Instead, they kind of went about it the complete opposite way, where they're using that center light as the default light. Like, that center light's always going to be lit, whether it's green, blue, or red, and then your outside lights are kind of optional for your extreme ends. It's something you got to get used to. I feel like this level's closer to like an SG Pulse, where it's just one solid blob of either green, blue, or red, versus the original Send-It level, where it kind of showed you some sort of orientation. And like I showed before, if you run the original MV3 vertical, you could just put lines to help yourself figure out, like, if the top lights are lit up, okay, I need to roll that way, versus the bottom lights, I need to roll the other way. I feel like they lost a little bit of the intuitive nature out of the MV3 with the new Gen 2 Send-It level. And it's something that I honestly reached out to MDT to see if they were ever going to do some sort of software update. And they said they would look into it, but it wasn't something they were considering in the immediate future. Also, just looking at this thing, there's not really an aux cord plug or anything like that to where you could plug this thing into a computer to do any sort of updates. So if they do an update, I don't know exactly how they would get it out to the older units, because this thing doesn't connect to a phone or anything like that. Overall, some other features about the Gen 2 Sendit level, they made it smaller, it's more compact. Also, they give you the option from the factory to either get it as a side mount, or you could get it as, I believe they call it the V mount, where it's going to mount directly under your scope in the center of your rail. I opted for the side mount here, and as of the filming of this video, companies are starting to produce some of the mounts for this because it is a proprietary mount. It's different than the old MV3, it's different than the Crush It. So the way this thing's set up, you're going to need a proprietary mount. I know Area 419 just kind of teased that they're finishing up the final touches on their mount for their scope mount to use the MDT Gen 2 Sendit level. So overall, this thing's kind of unique. Like I said, it's entirely different. This small button is kind of hard to depress on a rifle, but it's nice because it's out of the way. You're gonna be hard pressed to bump this thing on accident. Like if you don't mean to turn this thing on, it's not gonna get turned on because this button is kind of discreet, out of the way, and kind of hidden. However, that said, it is a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes. Like if you're on a stage and you're like, oh crap, I forgot to turn my Sendit level on first stage of the day, it is kind of awkward to get in there and turn that thing on. It also does, one thing I should mention, it does have an auto shut off feature in there, but make sure at the end of the day you turn this thing off. You could set it up. There's a whole, if you get one of these, read the manual. There's tons of different configurations, whether you want to adjust how sensitive it is, which you could do on both of these, adjust brightness, obviously, there's different programming. It's a one button setup and it's not a dial like the MV3, so you're going to have to figure out, it's a little bit quirky to get in there and work through the menus to configure it how you prefer. But yeah, overall, Gen 2 Sendit level, I think we've pretty much hit on everything. Now I think we're to the point in the video where we should kind of compare and contrast some of the differences, and I'll start to inject more of my opinions and give you guys my thoughts and opinions, having used both of them in matches. Alright guys, so now it's comparison time. As I said, I've used both of these in national level as well as one-day regional matches, done a ton of practice with them. I feel pretty comfortable, giving you guys my honest opinion on both of these. That said, my honest opinion is that I very much prefer the MV3. I feel like this level is set up way more intuitive. Like whether you run it horizontal or vertical, it's way more intuitive to use this level than the Gen 2. As I kind of already hit on it, but I wish they would have had the mode in here where your center light lights up, and then if you're candid, your outside light lights up. If you're extremely candid, outside light and center light up. Like I feel like they kind of did it ass backwards for what my preferences are. Now I know there's going to be guys out there, especially if you've used an SG Pulse or stuff like that, to where you don't really care about orientation. You just pick up that color and hey, blue, I need to roll to the left, or red, I need to roll to the right, or however you end up deciphering it in your brain. Everybody has different preferences. There's guys out there that whenever the original Sendit level came out, they hated it because it was too bright, too in their face. There's guys out there, me included, that, tried the Brant-Built and thought that was too, bright in their face. So I kind of prefer just a regular Sendit level mounted off to the side. There's other guys that swear by the Brant-Built housings and the different stuff like that. So it really comes down to personal preference. Everybody's got their different kind of things that they look for, different things that they're used to, and different things that they would like to try. And I feel like overall as a product, the Gen 2 Sendit level functionally is a good product. It works. It does what it does as advertised. Like it checks a lot of boxes, better battery life, a little bit more features. The downside is I feel like personally for me, they lost a lot of the intuitive nature of the MV3. I wish they would have that different mode where, if you're candid, your outside light lights first and then your center light lights if you're extremely candid one direction or another. That's not something that they have featured in this level, and it just loses the intuitive nature of me. And I tried all 4 modes in it, and it just didn't work for me. So honestly, what I'm going to end up doing is selling my Gen 2 Sendit level. I actually just agreed to sell it to a guy online. So I'm going to send this thing down the road and sell it, and I'm going to commit fully and buy a second MV3 while I can still get my hands on one. Guys, I'm not doing this video to discredit MDT or talk down on them or anything. The Gen 2 Sendit level, as I've mentioned, is functionally a great item and it works as advertised. Again, at the end of the day, it just comes down to kind of personal preferences and the intuitive nature, what you're used to. And for me, I'm way more used to and very much prefer the MV3. So hopefully you guys learned something from today's video. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. If you have experience with one or both of these levels, definitely feel free to drop your thoughts and opinions. That way others could kind of get another perspective. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has the complete opposite opinion, hated the MV3, loves the Gen 2. I'd love to hear that down in the comment section below. Guys, I make these videos for your entertainment and educational purposes. So if you guys enjoyed today's video, feel free to to give us a like, give us a subscribe, head over to Instagram, follow us at Practically Squared. If you guys see me out at a match, definitely feel free to say hi. I think I'm on a streak now where I've had like 14 matches in a row where somebody's came up to me that I've never met before and they're like, hey, I recognize you from the YouTube channel. And it's really cool. It's really humbling. I make these videos, as I said, for your entertainment and educational purposes. So all that support just encourages me to make more videos. Guys, as always, remember to train hard, shoot fast, and most importantly, be safe. God bless.